Greetings. In this video, we will create a hinge type mechanism that would be appropriate for an elbow or a knee. Let's get started. We'll begin with a polygonal cylinder. We'll come into the channel box and we'll scale that 5 on the Y. We'll rotate it 90 on the Z, and in the inputs, we'll make our subdivisions 8. Now we'll grab the edges on the caps. Take a look there at that selection, modeling toolkit. We'll hit bevel and we'll use our standard 0.2 and 2. So there we have it. We'll duplicate this, edit, duplicate, and we'll rotate it 90 now on the X. And you can take a look there in the channel box. With both of these selected rather than combine, because they are duplicates, the Boolean will just give us an extra edge automatically. So we'll come to Mesh Boolean Union, and it automatically generates those edges that we were after. We'll come and create a third cylinder, and we're going to scale this up just initially 2. We'll ultimately make it 2.2, but let me demonstrate why. We'll come and we'll make our subdivisions 12. And if we look at this in our wireframe on shaded mode, we can see that these edges are running along here. Now we would need an edge across the side. And so we can come to subdivisions height and make this 4. So now we've got a subdivision that's hitting here and hitting here, but we actually don't want it to be that precise. Let me just Boolean this, and if we take a quick look, we'll Boolean this just temporarily. When we hit the 3 key, and let's say we click off, there's some faceting here because of this strange topology. So I'm going to undo that. We'll come back to our wireframe on shaded. And I undid back one too many times. We'll add that 4 back in. And if we scale this up just a little bit, we'll come to 2.2. Now those edges aren't touching. They're touching across here, which is what we want, and they're still touching here. But they've come apart, and this will give us a little bit of a boundary between that 90-degree change in shape. So now we'll come to Mesh Boolean Union. And if we hit the 3 key, we've got an ingon here that we need to correct. So in the Z forward, come into the modeling toolkit, and we'll just do 2 at a time. So we'll come and we'll hit Object Z, multicut, and on the Z side, we'll quad this out, right? So we can get our familiar diagonal where we're going from a flat to a circular. And with mirror on, you can see we're doing that both at the same time. Now if you hit the 3 key and you can compare, we get a nice smooth transition. Now let's switch to X. We'll come back to the 1 key and we'll just quad this side out from here to here. Click dragging and hitting enter when we're done. Click drag, enter. Click drag, enter. And there is a pretty good shape. I'm going to come to, well, let's leave the symmetry on just for a moment. If we click off and take a look without the wireframe, that transition is pretty good, but we could tighten that up a little bit. So let's do that. I've still got Object X symmetry on. This is my positive X. We'll come to the multi-cut and change our snap step to 10. We'll give ourselves just a 10% loop right there. So the control key gives us the loop, and the shift key engages the snap step, which is in this case 10%, and we have symmetry Object X, so we get that on both sides. We'll come here and we'll switch this to Object Z, and once again control key for the loop, shift key to engage the snap step, and we'll hit that 10. We'll click off of that, come back to object mode, I'll turn symmetry off, and if we hit the 3 key and click off, you see we have a nice tight shape. And then finally let's bevel these tops. We'll double click this edge, shift double click this edge, and we'll hit bevel, and we can bring that fraction down. And yeah, we'll just do 0.2 and 0.2 again. And we hit the 3 key, and we've got a nice shape. This would be a good place to increment and save. In the next section, we'll complete the next piece. Welcome back. You've saved your project to this point. And note that we are Z forward, X on the left-hand side in our current position, and we'll come to create poly primitive pipe. And we're just going to slide that new pipe out in the positive X direction, and we'll dial in our variables. We want 8 subdivision axis, and we're going to scale this 2 on the X, Y, and Z, so double the scale. We'll rotate it 90 degrees on the Z. You can use the J key to snap step or just type in 90. And then our translate X value will be 4, and that will position it exactly where we want it. We'll continue with a second pipe, create polyprimitives pipe, and we're going to scale this 5, 4, and 5. We'll type in the 5s first, and put a 4 on the Y. We're going to rotate this up on the X 90 degrees. And we'll come into the inputs now. And our first pipe, we chose 8 for the subdivision axis. This one we will choose 12. And our thickness is 0.33. And then we'll push this back into the negative Z direction. And we'll do that exactly 8 units negative. And if you take a look in the orthographic top view, you can see that's the position. We'll now right-click these two faces. If you want to dolly around in the wireframe, make sure you have nothing selected. You could also take a look here in the front view. Make sure you have the same faces that I do. And we'll hit delete. And we can verify that, 5 key. We'll come back into the object mode, click the other or the initial pipe. We'll right-click face, click these two faces. And if you want to hit the 4 key, good idea. If you want to jump into the orthographic view, verify that. That's a good idea. We'll hit the delete key. And so we've got 2 faces deleted on both of those. We'll select them both. And in the modeling mode, we'll hit combine. And then we'll bridge the edges of the gaps. So double-click this edge. Shift double-click this edge, the edges that surrounded the faces that we deleted, and then we'll hit bridge. And if we hit the 3 key, you can see that shape developing there. We'll jump into the orthographic top view and we'll delete one side, 1/2. And then we'll mirror this over. We've modeled in this direction just to take advantage of the default, but we can open the mirror dialog box. And you can see that the default mirror axis is X and the direction is negative. And so we'll hit mirror and there is our shape to this point. Not a bad place to increment and save. And then we're going to narrow this so that it could accept a pipe for the rest of the leg or the rest of the arm. We don't want to extrude the entire interior, we'll just do this half. So we'll use multi-cut. We'll change our snap step to 50. The control key engages the edge loop. The shift key engages the the snap step of the multi-cut at 50. And so we'll click that there. I'm going to grab one of these faces. You can hit the 4 key just to see which face I have selected there. And then I'll shift, double click just one next to it, and that gives us the loop. And then we'll hit extrude, and we're just going to narrow that so that it could accept a pipe, and we can change that depending on the pipe size later on. We'll click this remaining face, or this rear face I should say, and then shift double click the one next to it. That gives us a loop, and then we can just extrude that out. And we'll double click these edges here just to make that tight by beveling, and we'll use our standard 0.2 and 2, and that gives us, when we hit the 3 key, a nice shape which will accept a pipe. Okay, let's jump into the side view, and we're going to duplicate this, but before we do, we'll put the pivot in the middle. So we're going to at the origin. So we'll tap the D key, and I'll move this out, and then rather than compete with all of that geometry there, let's hide our polys. So we'll come to show polys, which is going to hide them. And then X key middle mouse button, we'll snap that to the origin. We'll bring our polys back, and you can see that that's exactly there. And we'll tap the D key to get out of that. And you can see how this rotates around there. Z forward. Let's duplicate Now that we've repositioned that pivot, we can just duplicate this shape, and then I'll hold down the J key to pull that up so it's 90 degrees, and if you want to look, that's 90 on the X, and then we'll rotate this around 90 on the Y. And this rotates in this direction. Okay, and then we'll put this down. We're going to rotate this one downwards, 90 degrees, and there is our hinge shape that is appropriate for a knee or an elbow. Now let's clean this up before we move on. We'll come and we'll delete all of our history. Edit, delete all by type history. And that means that we can delete those two pipe transform nodes. And we're just left with our cylinder and our two pipes. Now we'll grab those three items and we'll group them. We're grouping them in this case because we'll need to scale to our existing modeling pieces. And if you've begun to rig, we need to scale to an existing rig. So we'll group those, and we'll also put it on a layer over here, and we can hide that away. So save to this point, and in this final section, we'll reintegrate this into our existing rig. Be right back. Welcome back. You can see that I've imported my existing leg. I've also taken my knee group and named it. I have it on a layer, and I'm going to hide that away. Now, this initial rig that we created had two knee joints, whereas the new knee mechanism only needs one. So we'll swap this out. If you saved your leg just as geometry before you rigged it, which you should have, you could just import that. But I think it'll be valuable for you to see how we can get rid of this existing rig. The first thing I would do is just, and we can verify, right, if we look at this, we can see that this has a IK rig, and we can move that around and twist that around. I'm going to hit undo, and I'm just going to delete that IK group. We'll delete that. Now, it's not as simple for the joints. If I grab the joints and hit delete, all of the shapes also disappear. If I hit the Shift plus, you can see all of these shapes, and we could select it just manually, but more common is to say show none, show polys. Now when we draw a bounding box, we only get the geometry, and we can come up to edit, unparent. I was about to hit Shift P, which is the same thing, but I want to demonstrate here. Edit, unparent. And now we can grab those joints and hit delete. And we're left with just our knee group and the geometry of our leg. Now, we're going to delete this existing knee so that we can insert our new knee. Let's jump into the orthographic front view. I'll hit the F key here, and we'll just delete this ball mechanism, and we'll delete the faces, right? We're going to maintain the top of the leg, so we'll delete those faces there, and we'll right click, choose faces, and delete these here. And if we come back and look in the perspective view, right, we've eliminated that knee, and we're going to replace it with our new one. We're going to come to the knee group. One of the reasons that we group this is so that we can scale and then reposition. So 0.33 gets us about the size that we want. I'll jump into the front view again, and we'll bring back our grid, and we'll grid snap this up. So we'll hold down the X key, and we'll grid snap that right into the middle. And you can see that we've got that new knee positioned in there nicely. Now we'll create our new joint chain, certainly a good place to increment and save. We were so careful to keep everything on the grid so that this next part is easy. We can come to skeleton, create joints. We'll open the dialog box and just make sure we've got orient joint to world. We're just laying these down on the grid in world space. We'll grid snap in the middle of that ball. We'll grid snap in the middle of the knee. And let's hit the 5 key. I'm going to also hit the X-ray and make the joints visible through the geometry. A little bit easier to see. My third joint comes down to the ankle, right in the middle of that ball. And then in the side view, we'll hit X and lay down that toe. And we hit return or enter when we're done with the joint chain. And then I want to do one little thing. We're going to come and grab that terminal joint. Note I don't have any of the other joints selected. And we'll just slide that back to the tip of the toe. Good place to increment and save. Once again, I'm going to come into X-ray and make my joints available. And let's turn everything on so we can see those. Okay, easiest way to parent, or most convenient way, we'll come to the two windows side by side. We'll come to panel perspective, perspective. We're making them both the same window. And then in this view, I'm going to say show only joints. And in this view, I'm going to say show only polys. And this will make parenting go by rather quickly. I'll click off, nothing is selected, and we'll grab both pieces of the foot, shift select the ankle joint, and hit Edit Parent, or lowercase p. Now we'll grab these two pieces, so just these two pieces, don't select this piece here, and we'll shift select, this will come right to our knee, lowercase p. Now we'll grab that piece, shift select, so we've got three pieces here, and shift select the joint, lowercase p. And then we can verify. I'm going to turn off, let's come back here, and I'm going to turn off my X-ray. And we can see that works if you wanted to pick both joints, you could, and you can see that working. And you could pick all three and see that they rotate nicely. Now, you could continue on. You certainly wanted to increment and save at each of those stages, because once again in the future we're going to rebuild this skeleton. But not a bad place to practice creating your flat foot IK mechanism. We'll rotate that up into the direction that it should rotate. We'll hit skeleton, set preferred angle, skeleton, set preferred angle. We'll rotate that back to 0. We'll create our first IK, and we know that that goes from hip to ankle, and you want to verify that that's working. It works nicely. We'll go from ankle to toe, and this just gives us a real simple mechanism. You can see if we grab both of those, that foot staying flat. We'll come and we'll group the two IK handles. You see that that puts the pivot in the wrong place. So we'll come back into this view, tap the D key, V middle mouse button, snap that to the toe, tap the D key, and you can see it still works, but with that pivot at the toe, you can also rotate up onto the toe. Now we're getting some flipping. We'll talk about pole vector constraints just in a moment. And then finally, we'll turn on a handle. Let's come to Display, Transform Display, Selection Handle, and we need to turn handles on in this view, which is here. And then we'll come into component mode, come all the way out to handles, and now we can pick that and slide it to the rear of the character to make that easy to select. And now we'll come here, we'll turn everything on. I'll grab that and make sure we're in object mode, and we can raise this up and we can rotate it up and we can slide it and we can rotate it all around, and that mechanism works. So make sure you save the geometry. That's the important part, because we'll be re-rigging as we go. But we can see here that we've got a little bit more interesting knee shape than that existing one, and it works nicely. Okay, questions in the discussion forum. Have a good one.